Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome to what I'm going to call Jim Green Yorktown story time. Um, I was in church on Sunday, and it's really funny. I ran into a Navy guy in there who's been around, Aegis and Aegis ships for quite a while. And he brought up to me, he said, hey, so tell me about what happened when you guys got rammed up in the Black Sea. And I said, well, officially it's not ramming. That word was sort of kiboshed right off the bat, and we went with the word shoulder. So I explained to him. And what's funny is 32 years ago, on the 12th of February, or 6 days ago, we were up in the Black Sea, and we'd been in there for a couple of days. We actually transitioned into the Black Sea on the 10th. But the reason that we were up there, okay, why does a country do freedom of navigation operations? Well, for us, it's called access, okay? We want to be able to be around and find out things via intel and stuff like that, as far as nations that we may take interest in. And the Soviet Union during the Cold War was a nation that we definitely took interest in. So we had a few things that we were running under as far as our policy or our doctrine goes. First, the Monroe Convention, okay, which talked about having access through the Dardanelles, which is the bottom part, when you come in between Greece to port, Turkey to starboard, headed toward the Black Sea. You've got the Dardanelles out there. It's about 40, 45 miles long to be able to get through there as far as the strait goes. Then you go into the Sea of Marmara, which is about 100 miles up to what we call the Bosphorus, which is another strait, which brings you in real close in there. And right there at Istanbul is where it starts at, Istanbul, Turkey, if you wanted to look at it on Google Maps. But that's going to take you up, another 18, 20 miles till you actually hit the line of demarcation or embarkation at this point. As far as the Black Sea goes. So we were running under the Monroe Convention, which was before World War II, saying World War II, which said that ships have the right to go through there, and it's international, signed by everybody and their brother, good to go. Now we took that a little bit farther, and we went under what we call the International Sea Agreements or Convention, as far as ships at sea. And we took into account that we wanted to have the ability to come into territorial waters or inside 12 miles, which is like internationally recognized distance as far as territorial waters go. Doing just basic driving the ship through there, not doing anything provocative, not shooting guns, not doing anything that'll bother anybody around the area, but we wanted to have the ability to do that. And in the International Sea Agreements, that is one of the tenets that you have the ability to do. Now, in 1983, the Soviets, they had another thing that they wrote, which is called the Rules of Navigation Sojourn, and the word sojourn just means temporary or temporarily. The policy as far as foreign warships go in international and territorial waters. They wrote that. Now, the only thing is, they made that applicable to places like the Baltic or the Sea of Japan or pretty much anywhere around the world that the Soviet Union had land at that was around water, with the exception of the Black Sea. They didn't want anybody up in the Black Sea, okay? They don't see that as like an international shipping zone and all that kind of stuff, but we did, and ours was based on the 1972 International Sea Agreements, prevention of incidents and other issues on the high seas. Okay, so we got in, we go through the Dardanelles, we get up through the Sea of Marmara, we go up into the Bosphorus, and as soon as we get into the Black Sea, because if you remember, we went to the Black Sea in 1986 as well. Black Sea in 1986, bang, right up through there. A lot of traffic. We hit fog and stuff going up through the Bosphorus. So I understand that. It wasn't an easy sea and anchor detail. But the thing about it was we got up in there and nothing really happened major while we were up there, and we did our little, drive around. Went up by Sevastopol, same type of deal, Crimean Peninsula. We got into like 6 miles from them, and we turned and we went on our way and came back down around the western portion of the Black Sea and proceeded back out through the Bosphorus and headed out somewhere for Liberty. I don't remember where we went. We probably went back to Naples. I don't know. Can't remember. But the thing about it is this time as soon as we got into the Black Sea, there was a caisson that was sitting in there. And I want to say it's within 5 miles of when we'd gotten into the Black Sea. And the first thing that they did is they hit us with their floodlights or their signal lights as soon as we got up in there and it was dark. So we kind of knew that things may be a little bit different at that point. And they kept the next day, for instance, as we were proceeding around to the eastern side of the Black Sea, they were coming close to us as far as shipping goes. And while we were trying to do an exercise that we had planned, they kept trying to interrupt our exercise. But through some good maneuvering, because Yorktown had some really good ship handlers and some smart maneuvering people on board, we had the ability to be able to do what we were doing anyway and accomplish our mission. Okay, now, so that's kind of the run-up to it. Understand also the Cold War at that time was not real. We were within a couple of years of the Cold War not existing anymore, but it was Russia's last stand to sort of say, Soviet Union's last stand to be able to say, listen, we are the Soviet Union, we are a superpower and all that type of stuff. So that kind of plays into it too. But as we approached the Sevastopol, or the southwest corner of the Crimean Peninsula, we had the same thing. We were going to go inside the territorial waters, just maintain on a steady course, and then come out of the territorial waters as we got out of there. No big deal. Same thing that we'd done before. Well, now we're starting to get radio calls from them telling us that if we maintain the course that we're on, that's not a good thing for them, not a good thing for us, and that we should alter our course. Pardon me, got a little cold. Now, I said a little bit ago, those the players that were in there, the Krivak, the Bezvensny, okay, pronunciation problem. I'm not a real Russian speaker or anything like that. But what ends up happening is she was a backup ship that day. It was supposed to be a caisson that came out that was going to come up against us, which would have been a little bit bigger, about a quarter size bigger than the Krivak was. And like I said, the Krivak's 4,400 pounds. The caisson's probably up there about 5,500 pounds. Would have been a better matchup. But so that's why the Krivak was out there that day. The Krivak's about 400 feet long, and you got to remember that the Merca that Karen was dealing with was about 250 feet long. Now, let me tell you about the command, okay? On Yorktown, as everybody knows, we had Captain Dirk. Over on Karen, we had Commander Harlow, real nice guy, did a lot of briefs with him back pre-med cruise type of stuff. Good captain. And we had the Desron, who's riding on board Karen. So Desron was really running stuff as far as who, what, when, and where goes, and anything that came up went through the Desron. Now, as we continued in, we got to the 12-mile limit. They were telling us that we needed to turn, all those types of things. And just to let you know, Karen got about 7 miles away, just inside 6 is what I think the official number is. And we were in at 10 miles, or just at 9 or 10 miles is the closest that we got that time. And we both spent more than an hour inside the territorial waters. So we did exercise our right. Now, the reason I brought up the command structure is because the communications as far as command and control went was from Yorktown back to the destroyer squadron captain on Karen. Karen would talk back to satellite communications, back to 6th Fleet, telling them what's going on. Now, here's an added part, okay? Colin Powell at the time was the National Security Advisor, and he was kept abreast of what was going on. So all the information as far as anything that was happening in the Black Sea, Colin Powell was being made aware of. Well, we're approaching. We noticed that the Krivac is coming in on our port side and getting closer. I was up on the bridge. I was nav liaison at that point, and maybe they don't have it anymore, but OSs used to send a person up to the bridge to work with the quartermasters and tell them what the navigation picture was down in CIC. Okay, well, I had that job. Great job to have for that day. Over on the port side of the ship, port bridge wing area. Really, really neat place to be. But so the Krivac comes in on us a little bit, and we notice, you know, people are out on deck. They got their little life jackets on and all that type of stuff. We've got people all over the place. We had an embarked detachment as far as Rota Intel people goes that were on board. I'd say we probably had 80 people on board that weren't normal ship's company, that were really there to take pictures, to make an official part of the record if something did happen, as well as for intelligence purposes. Everybody was there. I remember seeing, you know, people out on the decks, because I come out on the port bridge wing a little bit, and people had aluminum foil around their cameras so that spy wouldn't, you know, like mess with their picture taking capability. So that was kind of neat. Okay, so the frigate's coming in on us, and the Merc is coming in on Karen, who's behind us. If you, just for our purposes, formation one's what we're in. It's just a line formation, no big deal. But so they're coming in on us, and we're sort of looking at them, they're looking at us. The captain off the Krivac later said, he said, it's pretty impressive. He said, you know, the guys on Yorktown, they were just standing there waving at us, you know, and sort of no big deal. But if you go back to 1986, we were playing music back in the 4th. We were playing back in the USSR to these guys as we were getting close to Sevastopol. So for us, we weren't really expecting to get clobbered, I don't think. But they came a little bit closer, and now they're inside that 80-foot area. And I did notice that Captain Durf, later Admiral Durf, was a little bit nervous, and rightfully so. Got a Krivac ship coming in on you, and then all of a sudden we get a call over bridge to bridge, channel 16, stating that if we do not maneuver, and I think that they gave us a course to go to, actually, if we didn't maneuver, that they would strike us, okay? Now, I've read in articles that they said they would strike us with their ship. I don't remember the their ship part. I remember they said that they would strike us, okay? Now, that's not a good deal. Strike, as far as if you're a U.S. Navy guy, means that we're probably going to launch something at you. To them, strike was just, translation-wise, just meant collision, and I found that out later. Now, about that same time, we had a couple of Hind helicopters, okay, come in right behind us, and I want to say that they're probably, you know, 3,000 yards behind us, 300 to 500 feet off of us, but they stayed right there, and they were going with us as we were going, and we got the Krivac over on the port side, 2 Hind helicopters out in the back. And then we get word from CES, the ship's exploitation space, where the CTs and all the spooks work at, that comes up over bridge, comes up over net 15 as far as the command net goes on Yorktown. And Bridge CES just wanted to let you know that the Hind helicopters were told by ground control that if Yorktown rolls out her helicopter, to go ahead and shoot it while it's on deck. Whoa. Okay, now I'm getting, this is not a good thing. This is not playing the USSR and them waving at us and we waving back at them. So we're kind of in a different game here now. So what ends up happening is that goes from us, back over to the Desron. The Desron takes it, puts it over to 6th Fleet as far as communications go. I don't know if it went to the White House or not. I've heard it did. I've heard that it didn't. So whatever happened at that point, I don't know. But the word comes back a couple of minutes later from 6th Fleet to Desron, Desron to Yorktown saying, open up the helo hangar door. And I'm just sort of like, man, I don't know. This is not a good idea. But you got to do, follow your orders, do what you do. So we opened up the helo hangar door, but we didn't roll the helo out. Because remember they said if they roll their helo out, you're cleared to go ahead and shoot it while it's on deck. But that never happened. That's just one of the pieces that was in there that gets everything going really, really quick. Okay, now, As far as the collisions go, it was around 10 o'clock local in the morning. Karen got hit first, okay? The Merca came in, shouldered Karen, and then backed off. And then about a minute or two later, I want to say a minute later, because Karen, we heard them talking about it on line of sight radio. And then all of a sudden, the Krivac, the commanding officer on the Krivac, went down on his alidade, which is the compass thing down on the starboard bridge wing of the Krivac, and he shot a bearing forward and he shot a bearing aft. Now, we also, I didn't notice it at the time, but in the videos later, the people that had been out on deck like 15 minutes beforehand, you know, people, they were standing out there, they were looking at us, standing at attention, wearing life jackets, all that kind of stuff. Video, they were gone. They had gone back inside the ship, and I hadn't noticed it. Maybe other people had noticed it, but I hadn't noticed it. And he shot that bearing forward, and he shot another one aft, and then he went back into his pilot house. And in the meantime, about maybe 10 minutes before that, he'd lowered his anchor chain like 8 or 10 feet on his main anchor, starboard side on the Krivac. So we knew things were getting a little bit unique at that point. We'd already broken into the territorial water. He put his rudder over right hard, or standard, I don't really know what his rudder order was. Came over, bang, hit us the first time. And I've heard somebody say, and I kind of agree with them, it was sort of like you got hit by a big tug, okay? It wasn't like the collision as far as what happened with the Belknap and the Kennedy or anything like that. It was just sort of like a boom, okay? We set off the collision alarm, all that kind of stuff. Okay, that happened. Then what happens, and just to let you know too, Captain Durr kind of wanted to get out of there. Okay, he wanted to get out of there. He didn't want the ship to get tore up, but Desron said, nope, you're going to stay right there. You're going to do what our mission is. So we did. And so he hit us the first time, and then as he's sliding back, he comes over, brought it over again, hit us again, and this time the anchor chain went up on deck, back on the fantail, and what ended up happening is it wrapped around and did some damage to the stanchions and stuff like that. No big deal. But then it hooked on and messed up some of the harpoon launcher. Okay, so we had a problem as far as damaged harpoons. Now, at that point, Captain Durr sort of said, you know, enough is enough, and he came up in speed, and we sort of moved out from where that was at. What was funny is the anchor from the Soviet ship sat there on our ship because it broke loose, sat there on our ship and sort of went back and forth and bang, splashed into the water. That would have been a great thing to keep as far as a memento goes in the long run, as far as the ship's history goes. It'd be great down in Yorktown Museum. But that's kind of what happened there. The Hind helicopters, they never did fire at us. But you do have to remember, Hinds, they have anti-tank missiles and 57mm rockets on them. So that was kind of unique as far as that goes. I told you we had every type of rider in the world on board as far as those things go. Now, here's something that I want to point out. Don't see this in write-ups or anything like that. Warrant Officer G, who was our SES officer at the time, or the guy in charge of the CTs and all the intel on board, Skip G. Skip wrote a critic, which is a message that has like the highest message authority behind it. It goes directly to the National Security Advisor, and like I said at the time, it was Colin Powell. The White House Chief of Staff, Howard Baker, at the time, actually took it within 10 minutes of receipt into President Reagan so that President Reagan actually knew what was going on in the area. Let's see. I told you the CO on the Krivac said, you know, that we were just waving at them, all that kind of stuff. But I do remember afterwards, and this is where it's kind of a really neat memory. We got out of there. So Karen and us were out of the territorial water area now. Karen took a drive around us to see what our damage was. We took a drive around Karen to see what their damage was. And basically, the only other highlight that we had from there was that night as we approached, because we kept going west. And if you know the region at all, you've got Odessa, which is probably 120 miles from Sevastopol. But we were coming around, and that night, backfires every type of possible bomber that they could run on us, active on their radars, all that stuff. The EWs were having a blast. They were loving it. They were seeing signals that they'll never see anywhere before and aft. Now, I also need to point out, too, the reason that Karen was up in there, and this was like Karen's 7th or 8th time up in the Black Sea. Karen was a special spruance, DD-970. She had some, I'm just going to put it this way. She had some communications ability as well as electronic signature capability and being able to analyze those electronic signatures that were not norm for the class as far as DD-963, the Spruance class. She had some enhanced intel capabilities, so that's why she was a Black Sea ship and had been up in there so many times. But we went by and they just flew over us, and the number was probably closer to 100 than it was to 50 as far as the overflights we had that night. Now, you got to think of it from our perspective. If they really wanted to get down and nasty and stuff, we got like 66 missiles on board Yorktown as far as surface to air goes. And at any given time, you probably figure 80% of them would be, possible hit with a high probability. We weren't looking too good. We were outnumbered, we were outgunned, but it was just, they were posturing, we were posturing. We went back down, went through the Bosphorus, got down through the Dardanelles, and then we pulled into Haifa, Israel, or anchored off of Haifa, Israel. Shipyard workers came out, painted up our scrapes as far as where we'd been scraped up, fixed up the stanchions as far as that had gotten torn up by the anchor. One other thing I want to point out. HSL, okay, those SH-2 Sea Sprite helicopters, before the Lamps Mark III came along, I'm going to tell you something. I've told this story before, and I've been told by people, that's impossible. Well, I was there and I saw it. Sea Sprite picked up those harpoons and got them off because they were damaged to a point to where we were afraid that the electromagnetic interference from the 49 radar or from the spy radar could possibly cause another issue with the harpoons. I'll just leave it at that. So we had to get them off the ship and back over to a auxiliary ship that handled ammunition. Well, that was done with our HSL deck that was on board. And you got to remember, an RGM-84 Alpha, okay, weighs about 1,500 pounds. The Charlie was a little bit lighter, but that's just because of the avionics in Seeker were different than what you had in the Alpha. So it was a little bit lighter, but not much at all. So that's my story as far as the Black Sea goes. It's something that probably none of us that were ever there will ever forget. It's neat to have it come around every February. I get asked sometimes, I don't get asked sometimes. But I wanted to make this video, and hey, I tell you, if you have other things that you want to plug in there, do your own video and throw it in there as well, because this is something that, we're getting older and stuff, and maybe people later on down the road would enjoy taking a look at what we had to talk about because of what we did during the Cold War on Yorktown, CG-48, and it was a great time. Thanks for listening to me, and we'll do some of these from time to time as anniversary events come up. Have a great day. Yorktown.